piggybacking off that last point, what kind of jobs or industries do you think are most susceptible to that AI replacement or disruption at the moment?
So I have a controversial point on this. I think all jobs are susceptible. Like, I don't think, like, I have a 2.5-year-old daughter, and I'm like, sometimes I'm like, I don't know what she'll be doing. And, when she, like, will there be colleges and will there be like, will there even be jobs? Right. And I argue with my wife about, like, is she ever going to even drive? Personally, my guess is she's never going to drive. Right. So by the time she's 16, that everything will be autonomous. By the way, a lot of people disagree with that. And I'm like, I conveniently live in Austin, and I've been in a self-driving Waymo, and it's pretty wild. Like, the 5 minutes, you're like, holy crap, this is amazing and unbelievable. And then, like, after that, you're like, this is just kind of the normal. This is going to be normal. So, so I think, like, everything is susceptible. Like, I think it's going to be, originally a lot of people were like, it's going to be blue collar jobs. And then a lot of people are white collar jobs. And I'm like, it's really going to depend on each job's ability to create or category to, like, a lot of jobs will survive longer than they probably should because they have good lobbyists, basically. So, like, for example, radiologists, I'm not sure why we still have radiologists, because AI can look at any, medical image and assess it better than all the maybe 0.1% of doctors. Or 0.01% of radiologists. So I'm like, well, eventually that's going to go away. But it's going to take a really long time because they're going to fight tooth and nail and say, well, AI shouldn't be doing healthcare, or AI can't talk to patients, whatever. There's going to be, like, arguments against all that stuff. And then, all categories are going to be threatened. I think, like, in the end, service jobs, there will be, like, high-end service jobs that will probably be pretty well protected, because I think people will want to have human interaction at restaurants and other places. And so that those jobs will survive and probably change. Beyond that, I don't know what's going to be safe. Like, it's hard to say, but, like, I feel like we're going to enter a world where things are dramatically different in about 6 years.
Wow. Well, speaking of young people, would you have, considering the modern times, would you have any pieces of advice for young entrepreneurs or looking to become entrepreneurs that are intrigued by the idea of using AI for a business?
Yeah, I think the opportunity, like, there's always two ways to be entrepreneurial. One is, like, the big way, and the other is the small way. And neither one of them is actually better or worse, even though everyone is going to, after that soundbite, everyone probably would be like, the big way is always has to be better, but the big way doesn't always work. Like, the big way is highly risky. So Colossal is a good example of the big way. And Colossal was, pretty scary for the first year, because it wasn't clear that people got it, that it was even possible, that, so you just don't know if it's going to work because you're out there saying stuff that sounds crazy, right, on the surface. And then there's what I would call the small way, which is, like, Airbnb would be a good example of the small way. Like, we're going to create some software to let people, crash at other people's houses while they're traveling around. And boom, next thing you know, you're like, we're fighting against hotels, and we're like, have a whole secondary industry of people, generating short-term rental properties, right? So, like, if you jump straight to, we're going to create the short-term rental market, it probably wouldn't have worked, or probably would have taken longer. Like, and Uber's the same way. Like, if you look at Uber, you'll find 100 people who made a ludicrous amount of money as angel investors in Uber. And the reason there's 100 people that made ludicrous amounts of money as angel investors in Uber is because they had a really hard time raising money. And the original, like, deck for Uber was, a mobile app for finding a black car. Well, that might work in New York and LA and San Francisco, but it isn't going to work in, most of the rest of the United States. So it's not exactly a huge play. And what happens in most of these companies, they rewrite the story to sound bigger. Like, yeah, of course we were always going to, like, let everyone, like, rent their cars and, do, like, be drivers, and that was always going to be, and then deliver, like, but that really wasn't the case, right? So usually these things, like, start as small things, they get an anchor, and it works just enough that you get enough momentum that you can expand into the bigger thing. And so I think that both of those opportunities will remain. I think the big play in AI is harder because it's expensive to build. It's a big play that sort of fundamentally requires you to build something new. And building something totally new in AI is exceedingly expensive because of the training costs. And so it's possible that somebody comes up with some big plays using, especially like there's a bunch of new stuff that'll come to market, this year. Like NVIDIA has this $3,000 digits computer that's coming out. It's possible that people are like, well, I can get, two to five of those things and network them together, and for what is a relatively small amount of money, like train up a serious AI from scratch. That might be possible, and that might be a big opener. I think the real opportunity is going to be smaller plays, though, where it's like, I'm going to figure out how to use AI and probably agentic AI to solve real problems in businesses that are, that need to get solved. And so whoever sort of fills those gaps will have reasonably long opportunity paths. Those are just, sometimes they're just harder to see. So, and they're kind of less exciting, so fewer people want to go do them, which can also be a good thing, right? Because there aren't 20 other people trying to.
Yeah. So it sounds like this is a bit of a double-edged sword in that the emergence of AI, in that it has the ability to, you believe it's, all jobs are susceptible to it. I would assume that most people believe that at least some are. So it kind of has the ability to replace jobs, but also leaves a lot of opportunity for entrepreneurs to use it for the betterment of, like you said, businesses, and whether it's smaller or large place.
Yeah, in the short term, it's basically going to be whoever can figure out how to save businesses money or help businesses generate more money while the transition happens. The question is really like the really scary, 20-year out question is, how much, if AI replaces 80% of jobs, what does that do to the world?
Right.
I don't think anyone knows the answer to that. I think we will see new types of emergent economies. As I said before, I think games are really interesting, and I think games potentially could be a big part of the future of work. Because I think like jobs and work and entrepreneurship, all these things are people do them for money for sure, but people also do them for fulfillment, for a sense of purpose, for something to do, for a sense of, accomplishment. There's like a lot of reasons people do all these things that are not just, money. And so a lot of times people focus on the money part, but if you have 50 to 80% of the world is no longer, has the sort of jobs that exist today, what do they do and how do they, achieve those sort of senses of fulfillment? I think games are really powerful as a way to do that. And I think, games also can generate lots of money. And so I think there'll be pretty interesting opportunities there. I think we see it to some degree as the emergence of influencers and, Twitch and everything else, where it's like you've got, people producing content and people consuming content because they're consuming a lot more content because they have a lot more time, and they're producing content because they need something to do and they want to do something exciting, right? So it's like there's a lot that creates a whole lot of opportunity. I'm sure AI will play a role there too, but I think that's probably going to be an interesting place to watch.
Yeah.
And continue, certainly for the time being. Mm-hmm. And I think that like games will play a big role in kind of the next wave of sort of content generation.
Now, I'd love to briefly touch on Colossal because, to be honest, I'm fascinated with the company because it just, on paper, it sounds ridiculous. Like you said, bringing back this process of de-extinction. But I'd love to know how Colossal has incorporated AI specifically, and kind of what you've seen as to the workings of AI in the business.
So you have to be somewhat careful talking about really specific AI use cases, but I mean, so the interesting thing about AI in general in deep tech and complex situations is it's almost never straight AI. It's a combination of AI and some new methodology, right? And so what Colossal, I think, has done that is really powerful is figure out how to think through and apply kind of new technologies in a way that's clever, right? So sometimes things are just all about timing, right? And so Colossal is a good example of, and Google is another good example of timing is everything, right? And so a combination of what could be a major or even a minor technology breakthrough with the time is right in the world for some new type of opportunity to emerge. And so for Colossal, it's kind of a combination of CRISPR and climate, all the climate issues and extinction and all sorts of stuff that have become a big part of the conversation in the world. And using CRISPR as a mechanism to unlock the extinction, and it's only part of the equation, but it's an important part. Like without that, it would, nothing else would really probably be possible. So it's a combination of that with sort of thinking about the problem differently. And it does require a lot of computational biology and AI to sort of get there. But that stuff is really like less exciting than the actual core idea, right? So solving CRISPR with solving CRISPR problems with computational biology is compelling, and it's a dramatic boost for Colossal, probably be a dramatic boost for humanity too over time. But the specifics of how the AI works are like not generally going to be that exciting to most people, right? Because they're like it's like super in the weeds. Like everything that we do at Form, also super in the weeds. Like people are like, well, how does the AI work? And it's like, well, it looks at a bunch of stuff and it looks at, billions or trillions of combinations that humans can't look through, and it highlights some of the best combinations, and then humans can pick the winner. It could probably pick the winner too, but humans don't want to play a role in the process right now. But really, it's like this at the simplest level. It boils down to look at billions or trillions of things and find needles in the haystack and show them to people so they can act on them. Mm. Like that's kind of what it is today.
Now, I'd love to get your opinion because you've played a major role in the development of the internet. So in your opinion, what do you see as the kind of bigger technological development, the internet or the emergence of AI today?
I feel like they're kind of, you can't, we wouldn't have AI if it weren't for the internet, right? So like the internet is responsible for creating, both good and bad, an incredibly large amount of data, right? and that data is necessary for AI. And also, it's pushed the boundaries of lots of things. Like we wouldn't have AI if it weren't for computer games or video games, right? Like because without video games, NVIDIA wouldn't exist, and NVIDIA wouldn't have pushed the pace of GPU development at the speed at which it's gone, and we never would have gotten neural networks to work without GPUs, right? Because the core foundation of neural networks was invented in the late 50s and early 60s. It just didn't work. It just didn't work very well on the computational infrastructure at the time, and there was not enough data. So all these things are built on top of each other. I think from a purely like functional impact on humanity, I would probably say AI will have the bigger impact, but we're seeing really weird impacts on humanity from side effects of the internet and social media right now in terms of how people communicate with each other and the rise of extreme tribalism and lots of other, things that probably wouldn't exist without the internet, or at least wouldn't be at the degree that they're at. And so it's definitely affecting the course of humanity right now in pretty interesting ways. And so, yeah, I don't know. I mean, they're both going to be pretty big deals.
Yeah. So I'd love to close with a more personal question about your career in general. So in your career, if you can think of one of or a couple of your lowest moments and how you were able to persevere as a businessman, as an entrepreneur to become the major success that you are today.
So that's like the dirty secret of this stuff. There's a lot of lows. And I mean, it's hard to share the lowest lows because they're just very personal. And, I mean, I've shared low lows with various other entrepreneurs at various times. So it's like, that's probably one of the most interesting, if you didn't ask me directly about entrepreneurial kind of things, but I think one of the most interesting, like you'll see people talk about resilience as an entrepreneurial characteristic, but it may be the most important one and it's probably what also makes entrepreneurship extremely unhealthy, is that you kind of have high highs and low lows, and you have to eventually smooth those out to some degree, or you'll go nuts, right? And because sometimes the things that seem like lows are not as low as they might be in the moment, but it still feels like you got gut punched or stabbed or something. And like I started a company that was funded by Benchmark, which is a pretty top tier VC, and was pretty excited about it. And things were going pretty good, but things never go great for the first year of startups. And if somebody tells you otherwise, they're retconning the what actually happened 99% of the time. I guess you can win the lottery and things can go spectacular, but I don't think I've ever seen that happen. But I showed up for the first kind of in-person meeting after raising money from them, and the partner comes in and slams a piece of paper down on the conference room and storms out. And I read it, and it's a press release from our only other competitor saying they did a deal with Amazon. And I'm like, fuck, we're screwed, and they're going to pull the money back, and it's going to be a disaster. I read the press release, and it basically says that they joined Amazon's affiliate program. And I'm like, I could join that. I can join their affiliate program and do a press release with the same thing in 15 minutes too. So I explained that to him, and then he calms down, and sort of, but for that moment, it's like, oh shit, it's over. And it's like, that's the worst. And you're inevitably going to get hit by multiple of those in every startup. And, maybe they won't be as dumb as that one, or and maybe they'll be way worse, and it'll be way harder to get past them. Occasionally they do kill you, or the company. So they don't literally kill you, but that stuff is just hard, and it's stressful, and and then you're like, you also like amazing things happen, and you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I can't believe there's an actual direwolf, or I can't believe the direwolf is on the cover of Time. Like those are moments of almost the opposite, but you kind of have to not get too excited about those too, because you can't lose the sort of that, hey, it's still a lot of work. We're still not at the end. Still got to keep going. Can't, and it's that is probably, not healthy. And I take a lot of grief from my wife about, why aren't you more emotional? Why don't you get more excited about these things? I'm like, if you knew what I've been through in the last 30 years of doing this entrepreneurial stuff, you would understand. And so I think you just gotta, you sort of like, it's just tough. And like, that's the hard part about being an entrepreneur, I think, is just riding those highs and, suffering through the lows, and, keep moving forward.
So it sounds like maybe one of the biggest things, one of the most important abilities to possess as an entrepreneur is not getting caught in that kind of roller coaster of emotions where you have highs and lows, just staying flatline and consistent and keeping your eye on the destination.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it. I think, I think I probably burned a little too much off of that one. So I feel like I need to be more excitable and exciting sometimes about certain stuff after all. But it's gotten harder over the years, I think, to like be super jazzed about stuff. Whereas, I'm sure I think you've talked to Ben. So Ben is definitely more energetic than me on a lot of things. So, in some ways, like being, the sort of calm, even keeled person is good in the back, sort of more of a background role now as I get older. I'm like, I just want to work on cool stuff and build interesting things. I don't really need to be famous or out in front or whatever. So that certainly has an appeal, I think, to some people, and certainly have been there in the past. But I'm like, now I really just like doing this stuff because I like building things and it's cool. And I think after resilience, I think that the other sort of personality trait for me that's been really important is just a high degree of intellectual curiosity. And just asking like boatloads of questions and try to understand things. And at some point you see connections that open up opportunities.
Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to do this. Me, being able to pick your brain for 25 minutes. I think it's very valuable, and I know you're a very busy man. So, again, I really appreciate you taking time out of your day to meet with me and chat with me for a little bit.
Yeah, always happy to chat. Feel free to drop me an email if you have questions or thoughts or whatever. And have a great 4th.
All right, you as well. Thank you.